Hi everyone, you're watching CBC News BC. I'm Vinny Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here's what's happening right now. We're going to start with some breaking news. Vancouver police have arrested a suspect in the murder of Wataru Kakeuchi. He was a popular Japanese chef in Vancouver, fortunately was stabbed to death near Chinatown last week. 32-year-old Timothy Isborn was arrested in the downtown east side Monday afternoon, and yesterday he was charged with second-degree murder. Police say they do not believe that the two knew each other. And within the next 30 minutes, we're going to be getting an update from BC Wildfire Service about the summer seasonal wildfire outlook. Currently, there are 110 active fires in BC. Most of them are in the Prince George Fire Centre. While this year's fire season is off to a slower start compared to last year, much of BC is still really affected by drought. So in a federal briefing from Ottawa this morning, ministers said the number of fires burning across the country is well below average for this time of the year. And floods, extreme heat, cold spells to other weather disasters really influenced by climate change are making conditions a lot harder for people on the streets, especially those in Vancouver's downtown east side. That's according to a new report from the charity Union Gospel Mission and UBC's Sustainability Hub. It states the downtown east side community faces among the highest levels of overlapping hazards out of all neighborhoods in Vancouver.
So they're going through, heat stroke. They're going through pneumonia in the extreme cold. They are going through also compounding factors, right? So our community also faces things like mental illness. They face things like addiction. They face things like poverty, all while going through homelessness.
The report also has lots of recommendations for the city of Vancouver, like urging to reduce exposure to extreme weather, increasing access to water, and making emergency spaces more inclusive. And BC United has dropped its candidate for Surrey North. This is Asad Gondal. The party cited a number of issues with him, including calling the war in Gaza a genocide. In his role as president of the BC Muslim Association, Gondal also spoke out against the LGBTQ community. Now, BC United leader Kevin Falcon says Gondal wouldn't follow party policies, and he said he wouldn't change his values or principles. And because of all of this, he has been terminated. Again, Falcon apologized to anyone who was offended with this decision. And conservation officers in the Okanagan are warning people to really be careful around deer, especially does with newborn fawns. So this comes after a woman in West Kelowna was attacked while walking her dogs earlier this week. One of her chihuahuas was trampled and wound up dying. The woman was treated in hospital for non-life-threatening injuries, and people who live in the area and the neighborhood say there have been several sightings of the deer in recent weeks.
And I think there's way too many deers here. And if you have a little dog, I can see the problem, yeah. No bad experience up there, but I know they can be quite threatening.
The BC Conservation Service determined the deer was protecting its fawn when it attacked. Signs have also been posted all over the area, asking people to take precaution, leash their pets, and travel in groups and really, keep that distance from wildlife. And that's it for now. I'm Vinny Brach. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us. We got more news updates coming. BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. More turmoil for BC United and Kevin Falcon. A candidate has been dropped for his statements on the LGBTQ community and on the war in Gaza. Falcon says he accepts full responsibility. Well, from low polling numbers to candidate defections, what do you think of how Kevin Falcon has handled his party's recent challenges? In half an hour, BC's new seniors advocate finds rental affordability as the top concern. Dan Levitt will take your calls. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and we're live streaming on the CBC News app and on CBC Vancouver's YouTube page. And you can call us now on our top story. What do you think of how Kevin Falcon has handled BC United's recent challenges? You can dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, BC United leader Kevin Falcon has terminated BC Muslim Association President Muhammad Asad Gondal as a BC United candidate for Surrey North. In a statement, Falcon said that he confirmed with Mr. Gondal that his views on the war in Gaza and his support for the LGBTQ community, or his comments on the LGBTQ community, were inconsistent with the party. So he terminated his candidacy immediately. This is just the latest controversy for BC United. I should say that we did reach out to Kevin Falcon. He was unavailable to join us today, as well as Asad Gondal. We are reaching out to him as well for comment. We also called the BC United Party to see if anyone would join us from there, and we have not had anyone available to join us this afternoon. We're asking for your thoughts. This is the latest controversy for BC United and for its leader. So we're asking, what do you think of how Kevin Falcon has handled BC United's recent struggles? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Mo Amir. He is on the coast, the Soapbox Social panelist, also the host of the podcast, This is Van Color. Hi there, Mo.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. What did you think of how this latest incident episode has unfolded?
It feels like Quick Wins Part 2. Quick Wins, the sequel.
I remember Quick Wins goes way back. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Since 2021, when Kevin Falcon first announced that he was going to run for the leadership of then BC Liberals, now, of course, they're known as BC United, I've always maintained that this guy does not have the political instincts for this decade. And throughout the years, he keeps proving me right. Polls show that he's fundamentally unlikable. The more that he's presented to the public, I mean, they had this big high visibility ad spend on television. People actually disliked him more. Instead of uniting his base, as the party name would suggest, he's actually fractured it quite a bit. Of course, they've had many defections. A lot of other supporters and voters have gone to the BC Conservatives, and I would argue some voters have actually gone to the BC NDP as well. And it's not just his base, right? There were former organizers that were part of his leadership campaign team, people like Kareem Alam, people like Brandon Reddy. I'm sure it's no coincidence that they're both South Asian, who fundamentally voiced their opinion and their displeasure with Kevin Falcon's leadership. His messaging has just not resonated with British Columbians. So what happened with this week's saga with Mr. Gondal, I think, signifies the fact that Kevin actually needs to resign before this election. And I'll explain why. If Kevin wants to embarrass himself for the entire year of 2024, that is his prerogative. That is absolutely his right. But he has gone out and hurt several communities. Members from the Jewish community say that they're hurt by his actions. Members from the LGBTQ community say that they're hurt by his actions. And I actually believe that members from the Muslim community itself, as diverse as that community is, will also be hurt by his actions. And it's not because he scrapped this candidate, Mr. Gondal. It's because BC United and Kevin Falcon basically employed this like 1990s style form of ethnic outreach where they go into a mosque and they find the loudest guy and they want to check a box and they say, okay, you're our guy in this region. Okay, we got the ethnic voting block.
The quick win strategy.
Up. Yeah, and you know what? If you're trying to recruit Muslim candidates, why not go to the business community? Why not go to the medical community? Because we exist in those spaces as well. You compare that to the BC Conservatives, who are running 2 Muslim candidates, and those candidates actually approached the party because they wanted to run. Meanwhile, BC United is the only major party not running nomination races. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel to try to find candidates. In my neighboring riding of North Vancouver Lonsdale, which is currently represented by Bo and Ma, they're not literally doing this, but they're metaphorically going up and down Lonsdale with a sandwich board, begging people, particularly in the Persian community, to try to run for them. Okay. And everyone keeps saying no. So this is a disaster on all fronts. I think he's wasting everyone's time, but I think the more troubling thing is that he's actually hurting communities. And so I think he needs to resign.
Mo Amir joins me now. Some pretty strong suggestions there. He is the host of the This is Vancouver podcast and, of course, the Soapbox Social panelist with On the Coast. I definitely want to follow up with you on three of your points there. One is this call for a resignation. And, what does this do in terms of trying to find representation within your party and within your list of candidates? And outreach, as you say, meaningful outreach to various communities. But I want to go to a caller first. We're asking our audience to join us. Let us know, what do you think of how Kevin Falcon has handled the recent challenges faced by the BC United Party? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And I think David in Powell River is going to touch on a point I wanted to ask you about, which is how much of this does fall on Kevin Falcon rather than the party. So, David, hi, good afternoon.
Hi, how you doing?
Thanks for calling in. So, what do you think? What do you think of Kevin Falcon's leadership here?
Well, I don't think too much of his leadership, but I think he's kind of guilty by association. I think people are still got in their minds liberal, and so they didn't do too good a job last time they're in. And a name change is not, didn't do them much good. And also, well, it's got nothing to do with it. The liberals in this country are down in the polls. We all know, and people associate a lot of this stuff together, right? And a lot of people are moving to the right now. I mean, it's all over the world. You can see the same thing. And people are just made with government. But yeah. But I think Kevin is he's stuck in a tough place.
Tough place. Well,
because I don't think they're going to make too much headway between the NDP and the Conservatives in British Columbia anyway.
Yeah,
that's
David,
my way of thinking.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your way of thinking.
Okay.
So the guilty by association, what he's saying, with the BC Liberals and that history, but also with the federal Liberals, and we know, it's been suggested that the success or the rise of the BC Conservatives in polling has to do with sharing the name with the federal Conservatives and their high polling as well. How much of this does fall to Kevin Falcon, though, Mo?
I think a lot of it. I mean, we have to remember John Rustad was a BC Liberal as well. He's only been elected as a BC Liberal. So this idea that there's a branding stench from the Liberal name, which again, I think most British Columbians at this point are well aware that the BC Liberals and the federal Liberals were not associated. They did not have a formal association whatsoever. So, when you look at the polling numbers when Kevin Falcon started as the leader of the BC Liberals at the time, it's only gone downhill. And so it just seems like there's a lot of excuses from the party as to why things haven't worked out. They've blamed several things. They've said it's their own brand confusion with the BC United renaming. They've said it's brand confusion from the BC Conservative side, even though Mr. Rustad and the BC Conservatives, to their credit, have been quite open that they are not formally affiliated with the federal Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre.
A lot of pictures, though.
What's that?
A lot of photos, though, together.
Well, I mean, Kevin Falcon has done the same thing. So, what's in a photo? Of course, the guy is popular, so you want to get a photo with him. I'm sure every one of the BC political party leaders would love a photo with Taylor Swift to appeal to the Zoomers and the millennials.
The Swifties among our
exactly.
voters.
The big voting base. They got to lock up that voting base, right?
Okay, before we get to go down the Taylor Swift rabbit hole, because there is one, let's go back to another call. But you know what? Let me just also read Kevin Falcon's statement. He is not here to make a comment or to respond. We did invite him on, but he is at an event at this hour. So this is the statement from Kevin Falcon. As leader, I have made a particular effort to fulfill my commitment to make this a party of diversity, including successfully recruiting more women, youth, and people from diverse backgrounds. It was under that approach that I recruited Asad Gondal to be our candidate for Surrey North. Prior to Mr. Gondal's nomination, he shared opinions that are inconsistent with our party's views on the situation in Gaza and inconsistent with our support for BC's LGBTQ+ community. He shared those opinions in correspondence he signed on behalf of the BCMA while representing his community. In light of those statements, I spoke with Mr. Gondal today. This is yesterday, to confirm his willingness to adhere to our party's long-standing position on these issues. However, he informed me that he cannot change his values and principles, including disavowing earlier statements made while president of the BCMA. Given Mr. Gondal's decision to not adhere by our party's position on these policies, I have terminated his candidacy effective immediately. I accept full responsibility and apologize to anyone who may have been offended. How strong is that statement for you as a leader taking accountability, Mo?
I think it needs to be put into context, because only hours before that, he said that they stand up for their candidates and there can be differences in religious beliefs, even though, to be honest, I don't think having an opinion on the Israel-Gaza conflict constitutes a religious belief. At the end of the day, party values have to align. And again, I think this shows desperation in terms of candidate recruitment, that you couldn't find a candidate that was on the same page, especially on the LGBTQ issues. Kevin Falcon, for a long time, has said that his biggest strengths are fundraising and candidate recruitment. I guarantee you they will have very disappointing fundraising numbers in Q2. And right now, they've proved that their candidate recruitment is not very good. Again, they're just not running the same type of nomination contests that we see from the BC NDP or that we see from the BC Conservatives. So in terms of bringing in diversity, they're very much doing a push strategy where they're trying their best to get people, as opposed to a pull strategy where the party itself is so attractive and resonates with so many people that people are wanting to run for them. And, this ultimately does fall on the party leadership, not just Kevin, to be fair. I mean, the party executive is to blame as well. And I would probably say, the consultants that are leeching this party dry for whatever cash it has left also bear some responsibility when it comes to this really poor candidate recruitment, which, by the way, they spent the entire last week criticizing the BC Conservatives about poor candidate vetting. And here they are, literally the next day, we come out of that weekend and they're guilty of the same thing.
Yeah, the BC Conservative candidate on the island who had to leave for his social media posts as well. Mo Amir is with me. He is the host of the This Is Vancolour podcast and a panelist on the Coast Soapbox Social. You can hear him tomorrow as well. He's my guest for this half hour. It is now 12:19 Pacific time. And again, we are taking your calls. Another episode, more turmoil for the BC United Party and leader Kevin Falcon. He's terminated BC Muslim Association President Mohammed Asad Gondal as a candidate for Surrey North. And this is the latest controversy for BC United and its leader, of course, of Eleanor Sturko, who crossed the floor to the BC Conservatives. So with the candidate defections, polling numbers, how do you think he's handling these recent challenges for his party? Now, we also heard Mo Amir refer to Karim Alam. He is a former campaign manager for Kevin Falcon for leadership, and he will join CBC Radio this afternoon. So you can tune into On the Coast with Amy Bell. Karim Alam will be her guest. That conversation coming up after the 5 o'clock news. Again, for listeners in Metro Vancouver, you can catch that conversation after 5 o'clock. Another angle, another comment, and more commentary on the latest troubles for the BC United Party. And we're asking you as well, in this half hour of the program, what do you think of how Kevin Falcon has handled the recent struggles faced by BC United? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Coming up in a couple of minutes, we're going to hear from a statement that was put out by one of BC United's candidates. In fact, that's coming up in just a few moments from now. Dee is our next caller on what she thinks of how Kevin Falcon has handled the recent challenges faced by BC United. And Dee is on the line from Victoria. Hi there.
Yeah. Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I've got some maybe slightly more general topics, but still about BC United. One is I haven't heard this raised, but it was in their former iteration as Liberals that they closed Riverview and other places, and it needs to be recognized that some of the issues going on the street are because those places no longer exist for people to go to. I believe, I don't think it was while he was this, but I believe Kevin Falcon was the Minister of Health at one point. So he had some direct connection with that part of what the government manages. And then my other topic is sort of related, and you just sort of mentioned it, is that's crossing the floor. I think that when somebody crosses a floor, we have a party system, not an individual election. And so it leaves the constituents sort of thrown under the bus because the person who crosses a floor has now decided they no longer represent the party that the constituents chose. There should be a by-election if that person wants to run for the new party they're in.
You're talking about Eleanor Sturko?
Yeah, Eleanor Sturko, but others, anyone who crosses the floor.
Okay.
Okay, should be a by-election. Give the constituents a chance to express their vote, because that's what our system is. It's a party system, and probably they selected the party and secondly the person. But if that person gets in representing the new party, okay, then they were wanted. I think also the party that the person has crossed the floor to should reimburse the party that they came from, given all the campaign money and help and assistance they were given to get into that position in the first place. And so that would sort of settle that. And maybe make a person think a little bit more carefully before they cross the floor. There was an example in Victoria, Jordan Head Oak Bay, where Andrew Weaver, who had been head of the Greens, and he went to be just a Green MLA, although not just, and then he left that and became an independent.
Well, Dee, just back on this, on BC United, what then would you expect from Kevin Falcon? So yes, you would like to see, by-elections in those ridings where candidates have crossed the floor, but what would you like to see from the leader of the party that's been left behind?
I think he should recognize, maybe this would sort of stave off some of those crossings and see, what kind of relationship there is between his representatives that are in the government and him as a leader. Are they on the same page?
Proof is a proof in the pudding for support for that party that they've moved to.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dee, thank you very much. I can see Moamir listening and nodding along to Dee there. What did you think?
Oh, I thought there was interesting points for sure. I think in the case of Eleanor Sturko specifically, we're heading into an election in October anyways. So I don't know what you necessarily do in that circumstance. I don't know what you would do in the circumstance of being kicked out of caucus per se. Like, would you still have to give back the money or all that stuff? I think it's a little more complicated than the prescription that was just advised there. As much as I like some of those ideas, I think in practice it can be a little more difficult sometimes.
The practicality of it. Now, I mentioned a comment from someone in BC United. So we've made calls to the party. We've requested Kevin Falcon. There was a tweet or a post on X that was put out by Caroline Elliott, who's a candidate in West Vancouver, Capilano. And this is a comment that she put out in light of the Gondal story coming out. And this is not in light of the removal of Gondal, but in light of the story coming out. And so just part of it is saying, I was appalled to see BC United's recently announced candidate for Surrey North refer to Israel's defense of its people as genocide, less than 2 weeks after more than 1,000 innocent Israeli civilians were brutally massacred in their own homes. While I've long defended free speech, and even as I continue to vigorously defend it, there is a role for political parties to select candidates based on the degree to which they align with the party's principles. This is entirely consistent with free speech. A candidate rejected by one party is welcome to join another or even start their own. I firmly condemn the remarks made by BC United's candidate for Surrey North, and I'm calling on him to retract and apologize for his comments. If he is unwilling to do so, I'm calling on BC United to remove him as a candidate. Do you think those kinds of statements, what have we heard from party members, MLAs, candidates with BC United?
Well, first of all, I think that statement has to be put into context. Caroline Elliott is or was the vice president of the party as well, so she had a high standing role. She's also Kevin Falcon's sister-in-law, so I think that putting that into context is important. But there was obviously some backlash. I mean, you think about someone like MLA Michael Lee, who has spent years in his community of Vancouver-Langara building community relationships with the Jewish community. I heard that he was actually out of country, but I presume that he was quite upset when all of this went down as well. Clearly, there was a lot of pushback from former members. There was pushback from people that traditionally you would expect to support the party. And so I don't think this decision landed well either. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. This was something that really fractured the party. It was very short-sighted. And it does effectively hurt a lot of people, including some of his own candidates, who now have to go out and explain some of this to their constituents.
Let's take a couple more calls before we wrap up with Mo. I'd love to ask you about trying to find representation as well. James is on the line in Chilliwack. Hi, James.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are as follows. It seems to me that traditionally in BC there are two parties. There's the NDP and not the NDP. And we remember over the years how, for instance, 3 Liberals joined the Socreds to keep the Socreds up. And now I think in the present circumstance, Kevin Falcon has missed the boat. He has to abandon his principles and get on board with the Conservatives if they want to keep out the NDP.
As a political maneuver.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, James, thank you very much. Ben is on the line in Kamloops now. Hi, Ben.
Hi there.
Yeah.
I was wondering if anybody else has noticed the correlation between when the support for the federal Liberals started tanking, the BC Liberals, which I know they're not affiliated, but then they changed their name to BC United, try to distance themselves from the BC Liberal name. And now as the federal Liberals still support keeps going down and down and down, the BC Liberals, which are now BC United, their support still continues to go down and down and down. Whereas federally, the Conservatives going up and up and up. And in BC, the Conservatives, not affiliated, support's going up and up and up. It seems like a correlation that I don't know if everybody doesn't understand that the federal parties and the provincial parties are not actually aligned. I mean, I don't support the BC United either. I've actually never supported anything but NDP in BC because I was a union worker for years. I've never voted Conservative in my life, federally or provincially, and I will both this time, 100% for sure. I was wondering if anybody else has noticed that correlation of the tanking and support and the change to BC United.
Yeah, it's been a topic of conversation. Ben, thank you very much for the observation.
You bet.
We have some emails here as well. M writes, here are 2 things I do like about Kevin Falcon. He got rid of the Liberal name, which was long overdue and confusing for younger voters. When he was angry with a member, he got rid of him quickly. Hillary writes, speaking as someone who lived in his riding when he was elected for the BC Liberals, I have to say that Falcon isn't much of a leader. And Joanne writes, Kevin Falcon under Christy Clark held a number of senior cabinet roles. Changing the name was not going to erase his history and the influence he carried when the Liberals were in power. As we wrap up here, Mo, you mentioned the quick wins, the harkening back the quick win strategy that was exposed, that was a BC Liberal strategy, and it was exposed. We hear often about this struggle, the goal to recruit more diverse candidates to ensure that the legislature, our political institutions are reflective and representative. What does this do to those efforts?
Oh, for BC United, it blows them up. I mean, they've had some issues, I think, with recruiting diversity where historically they haven't. Under Christy Clark in particular, they did have quite a diverse caucus, and they certainly do not right now. In terms of their candidates, it looks pretty okay in terms of diversity. But I would say that the BC Conservatives are actually overperforming when it comes to that diversity file. I think one thing we have to recognize is we can't treat these quote unquote ethnic groups as homogenous blocks. Even internally inside those groups, there's a lot of diversity.
Sure.
There's a lot of differences, including generational differences, including how long a family has been in this country. And some of the politics that people bring from back home can be quite complicated. And we've seen this with the Punjabi community, certainly, where people misread that community or just want to paint it with one broad stroke. And I think politicians, particularly white politicians, if we're being honest, need to just get over that fact that they're not one homogenous block, and they need to be treated with some sensitivity and honestly an openness to learning, just to understanding the community. the fact that Mr. Gondal was nominated, and it didn't seem like there was much consultation with other Muslims, probably within the party itself, strikes me as very bizarre, because everything that we learned about Mr. Gondal was public information. The party knew about this beforehand. They could have consulted with other people. And again, it's making those inroads, and that takes time. And I think when you're trying to scrape together a team right before an election, 4 months out, you're going to make mistakes like this if all you're trying to do is check a box. And so I applaud the BC NDP for their diversity of efforts. I think they've done a really good job, but that didn't happen overnight. And I think BC United or whoever else that needs to realize that this takes time, this takes community building, and it takes an openness to understanding where the values overlap and where there might be differences, and if those differences are at the end of the day deal breakers, or if bridges can be built.
Mo, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Michelle, a pleasure. Thank you so much.
That's Mo Amir. He is On the Coast Soapbox social panelist. You'll hear him tomorrow. And of course, host of the podcast, This is Van Color. 12:33 now, Pacific time, and this is BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for being with us. And coming up in our next half hour, we'll be joined by BC's new senior advocate. Dan Levitt took the helm in April after Isabel Mackenzie retired. Now, he's found some important findings when it comes to affordability and housing for seniors. He'll take your calls coming up after the CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Vancouver police say a man has now been charged with murder in what appears to be a random attack last week in Chinatown that left a popular chef dead. Wataru Kakeuchi was stabbed to death early in the morning last Wednesday. The 32-year-old was a chef at Hapa Izakaya in Yaletown. 32-year-old Timothy Isborn is now in custody and has been charged with second-degree murder. Police didn't give details about a possible motive, but say it appears the victim and suspect did not know each other. A woman sent to hospital last week when an object crashed through her vehicle's windshield along Highway 1 in Burnaby has now died. It happened last Thursday near the Willingdon exit. Police had said they recovered a large rock from the scene. And BC and the rest of Canada is off to a slower start to the wildfire season. Federal Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan says the fire situation at this point is below the 10-year average. BC officials are set to give an update later this afternoon. And now the forecast on the north coast, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with a high of 14. Highs reaching 15 with showers and a risk of thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a high of 14 with some sunshine and a chance of showers. Highs up to 23 and mainly sunny in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, lots of sunshine with a high of 23 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with highs around 18 degrees. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much.
You are welcome.
You have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And you heard Rob mention there the wildfire update. We had one from federal officials this morning. And in fact, right now, provincial officials, emergency officials are holding their update for the upcoming summer season and giving a wildfire update. So this is going to be attended by Bruce Ralston, who's the Forest Minister, Bowen Ma, Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, as well as experts from the BC Wildfire Service. They're going to give their summer seasonal wildfire outlook. We are monitoring that press conference for you, and we'll bring you some of the details coming up later on in the program. It's also live right now on CBC News Network. So a lot of information coming at you this afternoon. It's a busy day in news. In fact, here's what's coming up on the Coast this afternoon with Amy Bell.
Hi, Michelle. It's Amy Bell sitting in once again for Gloria Makarenko. So coming up on our show later today, the city of Surrey wants to get input about dog parks. They're developing this off-leash strategy. And so they want to hear from park users, people who own dogs, but also people who don't own dogs. And so we're going to have a further discussion about that. We're also continuing our coverage of Arthur Erickson's centennial. So we're going to take a look at his works and architecture more broadly through the lens of accessibility. On the Coast is on the air starting at 3 o'clock, and I hope you'll be listening.
Amy, thank you very much. And again, after the 5 o'clock news, the former campaign manager for BC United's Kevin Falcon will be on the coast with Amy Bell. That's after the 5 o'clock news. In April, Dan Levitt became BC's seniors advocate. He took over Isabel McKenzie, who retired this year. And it's certainly no small job. His first step was to travel around the province to hear from seniors. And overwhelmingly, he says the issue for them was affordability. The seniors face many increasing costs, but the most pressing concern was rent. And Levitt issued his first report highlighting this issue last week. Now, if you're looking for information on rent, CBC has put together an interactive tool that lets you find out where you can find a home to rent based on your annual income. So if you're watching on YouTube, we've put that link in the description below. For anyone else, you can just go online and search for CBC Rental Interactive. That's CBC Rental Interactive. Well, this half hour, you can call in and share your message about rental affordability with BC's new seniors advocate, Dan Levitt. You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690. Our email address is bctoday@cbc.ca. Dan Levitt, welcome.
Great to be here.
Great to have you, and welcome to your new role.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity I've had the chance to visit just about every corner of the province, still have a few more areas to go visit. But when I toured the province and met with seniors and service providers, the number one issue that came up was affordability. And certainly, as you mentioned in the intro, renters certainly face, who are on fixed income seniors, face extraordinary challenges with the affordability crisis that we're living through right now.
How would you describe that situation for those seniors on fixed income who are renters?
So if you think about it, half of the seniors in BC live on income that is less than somebody working full-time on minimum wage. So, and you think about the number of seniors who are living at or below poverty, and when they're looking for a apartment to rent, they're competing in the same pool of as people who are working full time. And so a senior who's on that fixed income has other expenses in addition to rent that some of us don't have. In addition to the challenges that we see at groceries and everywhere else, they have challenges with things that you might have to buy when you're a senior, things like more medication or mobility aids, hearing aids, more glasses, and they have much more expenses than those of us who are younger do. So they face some really tough challenges when you have very little income left over after the rent you're paying.
I know you have a recommendation when it comes to the Safer Grant, and this is a rental supplement that seniors get. Tell us about that.
So if you qualify based on your income and you're a renter, which one of 5 seniors in BC are, so 20% of BC seniors are renting, and you're on that low income, you can get a subsidy from the government. And we were pleased to see in April that the government did increase the Safer Grant, but it's not enough. It's still woefully inadequate. And you could have some renters who are on low income who have only CPP and OAS. Their annual income is around $21,000. And when you look at how much money that is per month, it's under $2,000 a month. And if the average rent in Vancouver, for example, last year, according to CMHC, was $1,700. So $1,700, you'll get a grant up to about $350. And when you think about the amount of money you have left over, you're spending 76%. So for every $4 of income, $3 goes to your rent. And that's not sustainable. And our concern is that it can lead to homelessness. And they're certainly living in poverty and going without to make ends meet.
Even though it has been increased to expand the inclusion of more seniors, and even though it's been increased to an average of $310.
Yeah, and then so the additional people who are added on were approximately 4,800 people, so under 5,000 additional seniors were added on. The rent cap was increased, meaning the amount of rent that is compensated or calculated, which is around $900. That was great to see, but if you're paying $1,700 as the average person is in Vancouver, for example, again, you have that spread of $800 of your rent is not covered in this grant. And so we want to see the actual subsidy being increased so life can be more affordable. The intention of the SAFER program is that you're spending 30% of your income on rent. So the best cases that we've seen is 43%. And as I mentioned, 76% is still in the program. You can be in the program, a beneficiary, and spending 3/4 of your income on rent. And that's not sustainable. And that's not really the intention of the program. So we need to improve it.
We actually have an email from Lisa on that. Lisa writes, why doesn't SAFER grant adjust to the prices of apartments in BC, especially Victoria? And you have a specific recommendation on what you want to do with SAFER and how you would like to get it redesigned. Is it to do with adjusting to prices based on geography or inflation? Or what would you like to see?
Well, the target should be that the mechanisms they have available in the program, that the renter is paying 30% of their income, no more than 30% of their income on rent. So we want to see the rent ceilings increase. So right now it's in the 900s, if you will. We want to see that go well beyond 1,000 and going into closer, probably pushing up to $2,000 a month. In some rentals in Victoria, it's not uncommon to see something in the 2,000s. $2,200 for a bachelor suite by the Johnson Bridge is pretty common, and very small spaces in Victoria there. So we want to see the rent ceiling go up. We want to see the actual subsidy, of course, go up. And we also want to see more seniors based on income being eligible. So that would really expand the program and target specifically those seniors who are at risk of poverty and homelessness.
My guest is Dan Levitt, BC's new seniors advocate, and his recent report that he released last week heard from seniors around the province, and his findings are based on those conversations. And he says that the top concern is affordability, and whether that's rent or groceries, medical supplies, the top concern was rent. And so we're asking you can give us a call and speak to the seniors advocate and share your situation, your message, and what you think would help you. You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And by email, you can reach us too at bctoday@cbc.ca. Dan, we've had calls here on the program from seniors who say, I'm going to be living in a car pretty soon. I am about to be evicted. I mean, when you spoke with seniors, did you actually hear from people who were experiencing homelessness or had experienced homelessness?
Absolutely. And it's quite sad. It's all over the province. There's seniors in the West End where I am today who are in that situation. You speak to service providers. They could give me names, if you will, of people who are living in cars right now. When I first heard about this, I wasn't aware of this issue. I spent 30 years working in long-term care. We certainly have our challenges in long-term care.
Right.
Lots to talk about there. But when I met with seniors, and I heard about the fact that people who lose their driver's license because they're no longer fit to drive in their 80s, they keep their car. And I questioned, why would you keep your car if you don't have a driver's license? And then I thought, you're not thinking that you might have to live there one day. And that was the case. And seniors were living there. Luckily, there are service providers, housing organizations, shelters that seem to be aware of these people, find out about them and help them out. But it is a reality that there's some very tough situations. I was in Langley last week for a seniors celebration for Seniors Week. And I met a senior who was literally living in the woods in a hammock. So there's some people in dire straits, and I think it's our responsibility together to support these people so they can find shelter.
What about on the income supplement side? You did talk about an increase to SAFER, but what about as well, when you're talking about the senior supplement, does it need to be more tied to inflation, those kinds of supports?
Yeah, so for sure, the BC Senior Supplement is something that has been increased. It's not tied to inflation right now. Costs are going up much greater than it It is. It's $99 basically a month is the highest amount. 70% of people who are eligible for the BC Senior Supplement are not getting that amount. They're getting much less. It goes down to a few dollars a month. We want to see that being at least tied to inflation and indexed that way, and we'd like to see it actually improved altogether. The other thing we talk about a lot about is this idea of aging in place. Because we're not building enough long-term care homes, we're providing people home care, and the user fee to live at home. If you make $30,000 a month in BC and you're getting 1 hour of home support per day, you're spending $9,000 a month on that co-payment. And that's $1 for every 3 you make. And in some cases, for some seniors, it's less expensive to move into long-term care than to live at home because you have those other expenses at home that you wouldn't have in long-term care.
Do you think that that seniors, when it comes to rentals and housing, have somehow been forgotten? I'm talking federally here, the federal budget really focused on generational fairness, right? And it is a challenge for younger people to find homes. But has that focus meant that, the assumption is that seniors are homeowners and are able to live comfortably? I mean, where do seniors fit, I guess, as we lead up to a provincial election, a federal election? Is enough attention being paid to them?
Whenever a government releases a budget, I always look for seniors. I always look for where do they talk about seniors, whatever the aspect of seniors' life could be. It could be food subsidies at the farmers market. It could be food banks. It could be any range of issues that you want to think about. So I'm very sensitive to that, and we monitor that in our office. When I went around the province and met with seniors, they felt invisible and ignored. They felt like their issues weren't their priority, that there were lots of other priorities, but seniors were left behind. That was what they told me, and we put that in the report. We built our recommendations around that. So I do think that there's much more we can do to support seniors and certainly make their needs a priority. The thing is, in BC, there's 5,000 of us living here. 5 million of us. Thank you. Live in British Columbia. 1 million of those 5 million are seniors. 4 million of us aren't yet. And if we live long enough, we'll be a senior. It's in our interest to get this right. And of course, it's in our interest to get it right for the seniors who are currently there. I think diversity, equity, inclusion needs to include older adults in that conversation.
Scott wrote us from Burnaby. A citizen dividend funded from 1% land tax would provide $400 a month for every senior. This would end hunger for all and could be implemented immediately. When it comes to the budget, as you say, you look for seniors in there. Is enough being allocated? And I'm sure you'll say no, but what are we looking at when it comes to how budgets pay attention to seniors?
Well, one example of the housing piece it's been great seeing the housing emphasis nationally. And I think it's obviously needed, overdue. We've seen lots of affordable housing being built for seniors, those who are eligible, who can get into that. It's a great program, just not enough, and we need way more of that. And it'd be nice also to see that housing money being tied into care as well. So that long-term care deficit that we're seeing, where we're not keeping up with the 30 bed per 1,000 seniors, which is a high Canadian Health information recommends that number. We're not seeing that kept up to date, so we want to see more investment. So we do want to see more money being made available federally for the provinces to really improve services for seniors, especially around the housing side.
Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Your chance to speak to BC's new seniors advocate, who's made listening to seniors about affordability a top priority. He issued a report last week finding that it is a really big concern for seniors on fixed income, and in particular those who are renting. Let's take a call from Rick at Midday. Hi, Rick. Welcome.
Hi.
Yes. What's your message for Dan Levitt?
I just had a question about my wife and I are seniors, and we've moved to Midday, BC, from the coast, New Westminster. And while we were at the coast, we had a vehicle with we didn't need air conditioning, and now that we've moved to Midday, we need air conditioning, and we can't afford a new car. and I was just wondering if there's any help to get that for the vehicles, because we have no bus service or anything here. We need our cars to get to doctor's appointments and such.
Rick, thank you very much for that call from Midway. And I know, Dan, that transportation costs were on the list as well in terms of what you heard from seniors. So he's saying there, our car and the need for air conditioning. And we know how vulnerable, older people can be when you're faced with things like a heat dome. What is available for seniors when it comes to transportation help?
Just for the caller, thank you for that phone call. It's a lot of money, but some cars can be retrofit to install an air conditioning system into the car. I'm not a car mechanic myself, but something to look at. The challenge is, even if you knew what that cost is, it's probably not affordable for a senior. So what kinds of services are out there for transportation? Public transportation. I was visiting one city, and they had 2 handy darts, and I spoke to the mayor and spoke to service providers and seniors in this city in the interior, and they need a 3rd handy dart. And how do you make that kind of thing a priority to make sure that seniors can get around? Putting air conditioning in public buildings has been really critical. So you have, if you will, a safe house, a safe place to go during those extreme heat temperatures that we saw a few years ago. But the problem is you get there in the first place. If you don't have that car that can take you there, there's some huge challenges around transportation. One couple we met, they traveled from the interior of the province to Vancouver for chemotherapy and spent $20,000 in 1 year. Only to find out when one spouse had gone through that treatment that another spouse had been diagnosed with cancer, and they were in that journey again. So there's some really serious issues going on right now with transportation. That's a big issue, especially for those seniors who lose their driver's license in their 80s. And if that happens and you're alone and you're isolated, you could be socially excluded and face some serious issues around not being able to connect with your former neighbors and were really involved in your life before.
Do you have any advice? I know you're not a mechanic, and you gave some general car advice there, but anything that you can tell Rick in terms of, he says they need a car, they need their vehicle to get to medical appointments, but are there local organizations that perhaps you've come across or that he can reach out to in that close to the southeastern part of the province?
Yeah, I haven't been to Midway yet. It's on my list of places to go to visit with seniors there. Maybe I'll meet the caller at one of those meetings, community meetings. But I would reach out to Interior Health and find out what kind of services they have available for transportation. Some of the health authorities do have some pretty good programs available, and perhaps reach out to your local seniors organizations that are there. And if nothing's in Midway, I'm guessing there is something there. If not, maybe try the next town over and see what's available to help you get to those appointments. And certainly where you're booking your appointments, they might be able to help you with transportation. There are some service clubs that are doing great things where they're driving people in need to those appointments. So there are some great services available in local communities in BC. It's one thing I found out was, you think about volunteerism, who are the volunteers? They're seniors. And if it wasn't for seniors, a lot of these organizations, actually a lot of the system that we have for seniors just wouldn't be in place, because they're really the backbone of keeping everything going, the volunteers.
Rick, thank you very much for the call. Good luck to you. And I think you've raised an issue that is fairly common based on what I've seen in the report. And it does sound like it could be a challenge for seniors who do need to be cooled in order to stay safe from the extreme heat events. Thanks very much for the call. Now, I mentioned earlier, people think about seniors that might be, fairly comfortable. We have an email here from Scott, who writes from U.S. Seniors often have been in the apartments for decades, and therefore their rents are grandfathered, and they're paying much less than the average renter. To what extent is that the case?
Yeah, so we have seen that, and so those seniors are paying about 43% of their income on rent. The subsidy for those low-income seniors hits that mark. It's still not hitting the mark of the SAFER program, which is 30%. So there are seniors in those situations. Those seniors are also facing some risk. The risk is that their landlord will want to do some renovations, and they'll have to find a new place to live, and that can be catastrophic for a senior, where now they're in that rental pool competing against other people with higher incomes and looking at a rent that's going to be substantially more. So yes, there are seniors enjoying those lower rents, and there are some fantastic landlords out there that are quite reasonable, but that isn't the case for everybody. And it's just unfortunate when somebody who's used to that lifestyle has to find a new place to live. It just could be catastrophic.
I have just about 30 seconds here, but have you given a timeline to the province to respond to your recommendations?
We're expecting to hear from them soon. We're actually in conversations with them this week, hearing from them about what their plans are. And the last recommendation was around intergovernmental plan for seniors. And I know they're working on one, and we're looking forward to seeing that being rolled out.
Dan Levitt, thanks so much for joining us. I hope to speak with you again on this program.
Anytime, Michelle.
Dan Levitt is BC's new seniors advocate. His report is called Aging Matters, Listening to Seniors.